Why was a blonde, blue-eyed girl in chains? The question didn't arrive as a rumor. It arrived in daylight, clanking, unmistakable, right down Main Street in Thibodaux, Louisiana, where people pretended they hadn't heard it, hadn't seen it, hadn't felt their own throats tighten. The chain gang came first, men in striped cloth, ankles linked like a single creature learning to walk. Behind them, a deputy on horseback, chewing something like the world was soft. Behind him, a wagon with 2 rifles propped upright. And then last, like an afterthought, like an insult to everyone's eyes, a girl. Not a child, not yet a woman. 16, maybe 17. Hair the color of dried corn silk. Eyes so pale they looked like river glass. A face that belonged in a parlor portrait, not in iron. Her wrists were cuffed in front of her. A short chain ran down to her waist, then to her ankles, where the links disappeared beneath a hem that had once been a dress. She stumbled on the brick. Somebody laughed. It was quick and nervous, like a cough. Someone else hissed. That can't be. The deputy shouted, "Eyes front," but nobody could look away. The laws of this place were carved into people's bones. Who could be owned? Who could be sold? Who could be punished? The very sight of her made those laws wobble. And when laws wobble, men with power either tighten their grip or start killing what doesn't fit. The girl lifted her chin as she passed the bakery, as if she could smell bread and remember she was human. She met the crowd's stare without begging. Then she did the one thing that turned the shock into something worse. She looked straight at the courthouse steps, at the notary's office above the cobbler, at the tall windows where the parish kept its papers and its secrets. And she mouthed a name. Etienne. Etienne Theriot was halfway down those courthouse steps before he realized his legs had decided for him. He was 22. Creole. Too educated for the fields, too brown for the parlor, too useful to be ignored. He worked for Monsieur Thibodaux, the parish notary, copying deeds and bills of sale, sharpening quills, and, most days, pretending paper was safer than blood. He heard the name again, even though the girl hadn't spoken aloud. Etienne. He'd never seen her before in his life. Yet the way she said it, like she'd been holding it between her teeth for days, made him certain of one thing. If she could name him, she could ruin someone. The chain gang reached the courthouse yard. The deputy hauled her by the elbow, as if she were a sack of feed. "Where are you taking her?" Etienne heard himself ask, voice too loud in that square. The deputy's eyes flicked over him, measuring what he was allowed to be. "Where I take any property that's caused trouble," the deputy said. "Inside." Property. The word landed like a slap. Not because it was new, because it was suddenly absurd. The deputy dragged the girl up the steps. She stumbled, caught herself, then, just as she crossed the threshold, let her cuffed hands slip, quick as a magician, and dropped something. A thin ribbon, faded blue. It landed at Etienne's feet. He didn't pick it up right away. He didn't dare. Because he saw the deputy's horse turn its head toward him, and he understood the message hidden inside the scene. You saw. Now decide how much you want to live. The courthouse door swallowed the girl. Thibodaux exhaled as if the town had been holding its breath since dawn. Whispers rose immediately, raw, eager, terrified. A runaway from up north, a madman's wife, a planter's shame, a trick, a sign. A woman in a bonnet crossed herself. A man spat into the dust like he could spit out the sight. Etienne stared at the ribbon like it might bite. Then slowly, as if his fingers belonged to someone braver, he bent and lifted it. The cloth was soft, not homespun. Finer than anything a field girl would be given. It smelled faintly of lye soap and something sweeter. Orange peel, maybe, the kind women tucked into drawers to keep moths away. And stitched into the edge. So small you could miss it unless you knew to look. A single letter. M. Not a brand. Not a mark of ownership burned into skin. A stitched initial. like you'd put in a schoolgirl's handkerchief. Etienne slid the ribbon into his pocket and forced his face into stillness, because the courthouse windows above him had eyes, and because the moment he held that ribbon, he understood the true shape of the mystery. If a blonde, blue-eyed girl had ended up in chains here, in the heart of sugar country, it wasn't because the world had suddenly turned upside down. It was because someone had worked very hard to turn her into something she wasn't. And someone, perhaps the same someone, was now desperate to keep her that way. Inside, the courthouse smelled of damp paper and old sweat. Etienne climbed the stairs to the notary's office with the careful calm of a man walking past a sleeping dog. Monsieur Thibodaux was already at his desk, pen poised, face set in a look Etienne recognized, the look of a man who wished to be invisible while counting other people's sins. "You were seen in the square," Thibodaux said without looking up. "I was," Etienne answered. "You should not have been. I heard my name." Thibodaux's pen paused, just a breath. Then it scratched on again. "Many people hear many things in this parish," he said. "Most survive by ignoring them." "That girl," Thibodaux finally lifted his eyes. They were pale, watery, and sharp as glass. "That girl," he said, "is not a girl. She is a problem brought to our doorstep by men who solve problems with rope." Etienne's mouth went dry. "Who is she?" Thibodaux's gaze flicked to the door, though it was closed. "You do not ask that question." "Why did she say my name?" Another pause. The pen's scratch stopped. Silence thickened. Thibodaux leaned forward, voice dropping. "Because someone wants you to feel responsible," he said. "And because you are young enough to mistake curiosity for courage." Etienne's fingers curled inside his sleeve, finding the ribbon in his pocket like a talisman. "I can help," he said, "because youth always thinks it can." Thibodaux's expression did not soften. "No," he said, "you can die." A knock hit the door, hard, impatient. Before Etienne could move, Thibodaux barked, "Enter!" Deputy Landry stepped in, hat in hand, sweat shining at his temples, though the morning was still cool. Behind him, two men with rifles, not deputies, not law, plantation men, dressed in clean shirts but with eyes that didn't know how to look away from violence. Landry nodded stiffly. "Monsieur Notary." Thibodaux stood with practiced politeness. "Deputy, gentlemen." One of the plantation men spoke first, like he owned the air. "We require a document drafted," he said. "Immediate." Thibodaux's mouth tightened almost imperceptibly. "For what purpose?" "For transfer," the man said. Landry added quickly, "Legal transfer, ordered by the parish judge." "Of a prisoner?" Thibodaux asked. "Of property," the plantation man corrected. Etienne felt the room tilt. Thibodaux's eyes slid briefly to Etienne. "A warning, a command. Be paper, not blood." "And whose property is being transferred?" Thibodaux asked. The plantation man's smile was thin. "Saint-Merci." The name landed with weight. Saint-Merci was not just a plantation. It was a kingdom. Cane fields like oceans. A sugar house that ran night and day. And a master whose wealth oiled half the parish's decisions. And a mistress, Adele Saint-Merci, whose charity was famous and whose temper was whispered about like a fever. Thibodaux inhaled. Slow. "You are asking me to draft a bill of sale?" The man shrugged. "Call it what you like. The judge calls it a correction." Landry shifted uncomfortably. The girl caused a disturbance, tried to run, claimed things. The judge says she must be removed from public view. Removed, not punished, not tried, not corrected. Removed. Thibodaux's fingers tapped once on the desk. "Where is she currently?" "In holding," Landry said, "downstairs." "And her name?" Thibodaux asked. The plantation man's eyes gleamed, enjoying himself. "On paper," he said, "she's listed as Lise Mulatto, age 16. Etienne's stomach clenched so hard it felt like pain. Mulatto, blond, blue-eyed. Either the man was lying, or the parish's paper had already been bent into a weapon. Thibodaux nodded as if this was ordinary. "What is the stated reason for transfer?" he asked calmly. The plantation man leaned forward, voice lowering as if sharing a joke. "To prevent contagion." "Contagion," Thibodaux repeated. "Talk spreads," the man said. "We intend to stop it." Landry cleared his throat, eyes darting. Toward Etienne, toward the window, toward anywhere but the truth. "The judge's seal is ready," Landry said. "We just need your hand to make it proper." Proper. The room filled with that old Southern magic. If you put it on paper, it becomes righteous. Thibodaux reached for a fresh sheet, dipping his pen. He did not look at Etienne as he spoke. "Etienne," he said, "go downstairs and fetch the ledger from the cabinet, the one with transfers." Etienne understood instantly. The cabinet was empty. Thibodaux was sending him away, not to fetch paper, to avoid witnessing the moment the law strangled a girl. But Etienne's feet did not move. "Monsieur," he began. And then, before his courage could collapse, he said the thing no one said to men with rifles. "I saw her in the square." The plantation man's eyes snapped to him. "And?" the man asked, sweet as sugar. "And she isn't mulatto," Etienne said, feeling the words burn his tongue. "Not by sight." Landry's face went pale. Thibodaux' voice sharpened. "Etienne?" But the plantation man laughed softly, amused. "You think sight makes law?" he asked. "My friend, paper makes law. Sight makes trouble." He stepped closer. Close enough Etienne could smell tobacco and clean linen. "You saw a blonde girl and thought the world had changed," the man murmured. "It hasn't. The world is exactly the same. It just has a new secret." Then he looked at Thibodaux. "Draft the document," he said, "or the judge will find another notary who can." Thibodaux' jaw tightened. He dipped his pen again. And Etienne realized something chilling. The parish wasn't debating whether the girl belonged in chains. The parish was debating how fast it could move her somewhere. No one would ask questions. Downstairs, the holding cells were cool and damp, carved into the courthouse like an afterthought. Etienne descended alone, the echo of his steps swallowed by stone. At the bottom, a narrow corridor led to iron bars. He passed 2 drunk men snoring in filth. Past a boy with a bruised cheek staring at the wall. Then he reached the last cell. She stood, not sitting, not curled, not broken, standing. Blonde hair loose around her shoulders, dirty now from the square's dust. One wrist rubbed raw where the iron had bitten her skin. Her eyes fixed on Etienne, as if she'd expected him, as if he were the only door left. "You drop this," Etienne whispered, pulling the blue ribbon from his pocket. Her gaze locked on it for half a heartbeat, then returned to his face. "Did you read it?" she asked. Her voice was wrong for the cell. Not refined exactly, but shaped by schooling, by someone correcting vowels, by someone insisting on manners even when the world had none. "There's a letter," Etienne said carefully. She exhaled, almost a laugh, bitter. "They made me sew it into everything," she said, "so I wouldn't forget." "Forget what?" Etienne asked. Her eyes flicked to the corridor behind him. "They're selling me tonight," she said quickly. "Not in Thibodaux, not where people can stare. They're taking me downriver." "Why?" Etienne asked. "If you belong to Saint-Merci, why not keep you there?" "Because Saint-Merci isn't trying to keep me," she snapped. "Saint-Merci is trying to erase me." She stepped closer to the bars until her breath touched the iron. "Listen," she hissed. "They wrote me down as mulatto. They wrote my mother down as—" She swallowed, throat working. "They wrote her down as Iris," she said, "an enslaved woman. But my mother was not Iris. My mother—" Her voice broke, then hardened into steel. "My mother was the reason they can't let me live where anyone can see my face." Etienne's heart hammered. "Who are you?" She stared at him like he'd asked for the sun. "Tell me your name," he insisted, softer. "Not what they wrote." She hesitated. Then she said it fast, like spitting out a splinter. "Margot." The name hit Etienne strangely, familiar, like a song he'd heard once in another room. "Margot what?" he asked. Her eyes flashed. "You already know," she said. "I don't." "You do," she insisted, furious, not at him, but at the world that kept forcing her to repeat herself. "You work upstairs with the paper. You're the only one here who can read the parish's lies." Etienne swallowed. "Margot Saint-Merci?" he guessed. Her mouth tightened. Her eyes shone, but she refused to let tears fall. "You said it," she whispered. "Not me." A sound echoed above. Boots on stairs. Voices. Margot's eyes widened. "They're coming," she breathed. "You have to—" "Wait," Etienne whispered urgently. "Why did you say my name in the square? How do you know it?" Margot's gaze dropped, just for a second, to the pocket where the ribbon had been. Then she looked up and said, very quietly, "Because you copied the deed the day they stole me." Etienne went cold. "I never—" he began. But footsteps thundered closer. Margot shoved her hand through the bars, fingers trembling, and pressed something into his palm. A tiny object, hard, cold. A key? No, too small. A ring. Simple gold, worn thin. And inside the band, etched so faint it could be missed. A.S.M. Adele Saint-Merci, the mistress. Margot's lips twisted in something that wasn't a smile. "She keeps her secrets on her hands," Margot whispered. "Now one is on yours." The voices reached the corridor. Etienne closed his fingers over the ring, just as Deputy Landry rounded the corner. Landry froze when he saw Etienne at the cell. "What are you doing?" the deputy barked. Etienne forced his face into boredom. "The notary sent me for the transfer ledger." Landry's eyes narrowed. "You don't need to talk to her." "I didn't," Etienne lied. Behind him, Margot stood silent, eyes flat as stones. Landry stepped closer, keys jangling. "Upstairs," he snapped at Etienne. "Now!" Etienne turned, walking away with his spine stiff, his palms sweating around the ring. He reached the stairs, climbed, each step louder than the last. Behind him, a metal latch clanged. A girl in chains was being moved like luggage, and Etienne had just been handed a piece of the mistress's life, which meant one thing. This wasn't just a scandal. It was a war hidden inside paperwork, one that could swallow anyone who touched it. That afternoon, Thibodaux's heat pressed down like a hand. Cane wagons rolled past the courthouse with slow creaking patience. The river smelled of mud and sweetness. Men drank on porches and pretended they hadn't seen a miracle turn into a crime. Upstairs, Thibodaux drafted the transfer document with a trembling calm, while the plantation men watched as if enjoying a play. Etienne stood at the window, pretending to check ink, while his mind raced like a trapped animal. Margot said he copied the deed the day they stole her. He tried to remember every document he'd ever written. Bills of sale, transfers, mortgages, manumissions denied, manumissions forged. A face floated up from memory. Blurry at first, then sharp. A woman at Saint-Merci's big house, years ago, standing in the doorway with sunlight behind her, hairpinned, smile perfect. Adele Saint-Merci. She'd visited the notary's office once, coming with perfume and authority, gloved hands on the desk as if she owned the wood. And beside her, just for a moment, before a maid hurried her away, a pale little girl holding a blue ribbon. "Monsieur Theriot," one of the plantation men said suddenly, voice too friendly. "You look unwell." Etienne turned slowly. "The heat," he said. The man smiled. "Heat makes men confess things. Best not to let it." Thibodaux's pen scratched on, faster now. When the document was done, the plantation man took it, rolled it, and sealed it with wax that bore the parish judge's crest. Then he turned to Landry. "Tonight," he said. "No delays." Landry nodded. As they left, the plantation man paused at the door and glanced back at Etienne. "You seem like a smart young man," he said. "Smart men survive by being blind when necessary." Then he walked out. Livaudais waited until the footsteps faded before rounding on Etienne's. "You went downstairs," he hissed. "I had to," Etienne said. Livaudais grabbed him by the collar and yanked him close. "Listen to me," he said, voice low and shaking. "Saint-Merci is not just a plantation. It is a web. It touches the judge, the sheriff, the priest, the sugar broker in New Orleans. If you pull one thread, you will find your neck." Etienne's throat tightened. He hesitated, then, because the ring in his pocket felt like a weight dragging him toward truth, he said it. "She says she's Margot Saint-Merci." Livaudais' face went gray. "No," he breathed. "That child is dead?" Etienne challenged. Livaudais' eyes flicked to the window again, paranoid. He released Etienne as if burned. "Do you understand what you're saying?" he whispered. "If she is who she claims, then the entire parish helped bury a living heir." Etienne swallowed. "Then why chain her? Why write her as mulatto?" Livaudais stared at him a long moment. Then he said, very softly, as if the truth itself might be listening, "Because in this place, blood doesn't decide your fate," he said. "Paper does." He moved to a cabinet, unlocked it, and pulled out a thick ledger bound in cracked leather. He opened it, flipping pages with trembling fingers. Transfers, names, dates. Then he stopped. His finger traced a line, and Etienne felt his skin prickle. "What?" he asked. Livaudais looked up, eyes haunted. "There was a transfer," he said. 7 years ago. From Saint-Merci." Etienne leaned in. The ink was brown with age. The handwriting was his own. His apprentice hand from years ago, careful and proud. And there in black lines that had once seemed harmless. One female, listed as Lise Mulatto, age 9. Mother, Iris, enslaved. Etienne's mouth went dry. 9. 7 years ago. A child. A child who would now be 16. A child whose eyes the color of river glass had just called him by name. Livaudais' voice cracked. That means they've been planning this for years," Etienne whispered. "And it means," Livaudais said, barely audible, "that if she ever steps in front of the wrong person under good light." He didn't finish. He didn't have to. Because Etienne suddenly saw the shape of the trap. A girl who looked white. Listed as enslaved. Transferred quietly, repeatedly, through paper that turned her into property. Kept out of sight until she grew old enough to understand what she was. Then chained and removed the moment she spoke a name. And the mistress's ring in Etienne's pocket like a confession made of gold. Outside, church bells rang the hour. Inside, Etienne understood something that made his stomach turn colder than fear. This wasn't just about hiding a girl. It was about hiding a birth. A birth that had happened at Saint-Merci. A night when 2 mothers bled at once. A night when paper could be rewritten before dawn. And somewhere in the parish, someone who had been living a stolen life, wearing someone else's name like a fine coat. By late afternoon, Thibodaux had turned the way it always turned when something unnatural happened in public. The town pretended it was ordinary, and the pretending made it meaner. Men lingered too long outside the saloon. Women shut shutters, though the sun still burned. Even the dogs seemed quieter, as if they could smell fear on human skin. Upstairs, Livaudais kept flipping the ledger pages with a shaking finger, like he could scrub away ink by touching it. "There are 3 transfers," he murmured. "Not 1. Etienne leaned close, eyes scanning the dates, the names, the signatures that had once looked like nothing but loops and lines. First transfer, 7 years ago. Saint-Merci to a broker in New Orleans. Second, 4 years ago. New Orleans back to Saint-Merci, listed as household use. Third, last winter, Saint-Merci, to a parish work detail, as if she were being loaned out like a mule. Each time, the same lie. Lise, mulatto, daughter of Iris. Each time, a different witness signature. Men who owed Saint-Merci money. Men who owed Saint-Merci silence. And that's the point, Etienne whispered, the shape of it sharpening inside him. They moved her around on paper so no one would remember her face in one place long enough to ask. Livaudais's mouth tightened. And today she asked anyway, in the square. She said my name, Etienne said. She said it because someone wanted you marked, Livaudais shot back. Or because she's clever and desperate, and chose the first man near paper. Etienne almost snapped at him, almost, until he remembered the iron on her wrists, and the steady way she'd stood in a cell like the stone itself belonged to her. She wasn't guessing, Etienne said. She knew. Livaudais exhaled through his nose, a sound like surrender. Then he reached into a drawer and pulled out a small tin box. Inside, 2 seals. One was his own notary crest. The other, wrapped in cloth like it was contagious, was the parish judge's seal. Etienne stared. You have that? Livaudais didn't meet his eyes. Men of influence leave things behind when they drink. Men like me learn what to keep. You could stop the transfer, Etienne said, hope surging too fast. A stay. A writ. Anything with that seal. And then what? Livaudais snapped, finally looking up. His eyes were wet, furious. You think wax wins against rifles? It buys time, Etienne insisted. Time for what? Livaudais demanded. For Saint-Merci to decide you should vanish too? The word vanish hit Etienne like cold water. He thought of Margot, of how quickly the courthouse doors had swallowed her, how neatly the parish could chew a person and leave no bones. Still, he didn't back away. Time for truth, he said. Livaudais' lips curled, not quite a smile. Truth, he repeated, like it was a child's toy. Then quieter, he added, truth is expensive here. Etienne's hand went to his pocket, finding the ring. The thin gold band felt warmer than it should. I have something else, he said. He placed it on the desk. Livaudais's eyes widened the instant he saw the engraving inside. His breath caught. Where did you get this? He whispered. She gave it to me, Etienne said. Margot. Livaudais stared at the ring as if it were a snake in daylight. That ring belongs to Madame Adèle Saint-Merci. So she admits it, Etienne said. Livaudais looked up sharply. No, that ring proves only one thing. You are holding a piece of a woman who does not tolerate pieces missing. Etienne swallowed. Then it's leverage. Leverage. Another paper word. Another lie men told themselves to feel strong. Livaudais closed his fingers over the ring, then slid it back across the desk toward Etienne, like he couldn't bear to touch it longer. If you want leverage, he said, voice low, you need something written before God, not before the judge. What does that mean? Etienne asked. Livaudais hesitated. Then he said the next words, like he was choosing to step off a cliff. The Saint-Merci family Bible. Etienne blinked. A Bible? Births, Livaudais said. Deaths. Marriages. Names inked by hands that believed ink could reach heaven. If a child was born at Saint-Merci and recorded there, the paper upstairs becomes shakier. Etienne felt his pulse quicken. Then we go to Saint-Merci. Livaudais's face tightened. We. Etienne met his gaze. You know the road. You know the people. And you're the one with the judge's seal. For a long moment, the notary looked like he might refuse, like fear might win. Then he glanced at the window, down at the square where the town's pretending was already hardening into cruelty. When is the transfer? He asked. Tonight, Etienne said. Downriver. Livaudais's throat bobbed. Then you don't have all night to be brave. Etienne leaned in. Don't look away now, he said softly, almost to himself. Not when we're this close. Livaudet flinched at the words as if Etienne had spoken a prayer. "Fine," he said. "But you listen to me. We do this clean. Quiet. If you think you're a hero, you'll die like one." Etienne didn't answer, because he wasn't thinking about being a hero. He was thinking about that moment in the square, when a girl who didn't belong in iron had stared at the courthouse windows like she was memorizing the faces behind them. As the sun began to dip, they left through the back stairs of the courthouse, avoiding the deputies and the plantation men still lingering like vultures near law. Livaudet took a small carriage. Etienne climbed beside him. They rolled out of Thibodaux toward Bayeux-la-Fourche, the road lined with cane, tall enough to hide a man standing upright. The air smelled sweet and rotten at once, like sugar trying to cover blood. For a while, neither spoke. Then Livaudet said very quietly, "There's something else." Etienne's jaw tightened. "Of course there is." Livaudet swallowed. "Madame Saint-Merci came to my office 2 months ago." Etienne turned sharply. "Why?" "She asked me to locate a document," Livaudet said. "An old draft. Something never finalized." "A will," Etienne guessed. Livaudet didn't answer immediately, which was answer enough. "She looked frightened," he said finally. "Not the fear of a woman worried about money, the fear of a woman worried about her name." Etienne stared at the cane moving past like waves. "And you helped her." Livaudet's hands tightened on the reins. "I stalled her." "That's not the same as helping," Etienne said. "No," Livaudet admitted. "It isn't." They rode in silence again until the plantation gates rose ahead. Tall wooden posts, iron hinges, and a sign carved with saintly letters that felt like mockery. Saint Merci. The house sat beyond a live oak, white painted, its gallery wide like a grin. Smoke curled from the sugar house farther back, where the real heart of the place beat. Hot, relentless. A guard stood at the gate with a shotgun, eyes narrowing at the approaching carriage. Livaudet lifted a hand. "Notary Livaudet," he called. "I'm expected." The guard hesitated, then swung the gate open with a creak that sounded like warning. They rolled into the yard. Servants moved quickly, eyes down. Lanterns were being lit along the gallery, even though dusk hadn't fully taken the sky. A hush sat over the place, not peaceful, but controlled. As they climbed out, a woman stepped onto the gallery above them. Madame Adèle Saint-Merci. She was dressed as if for church, even at this hour. Dark silk, gloves, hair pinned perfectly. She held herself like a portrait that had learned to speak. Her eyes found Etienne immediately. Not curiosity, recognition. A slow measuring look that made his skin tighten. "So," she said, voice smooth as polished wood, "the parish sends me paper and boys." Livaudet bowed slightly. "Madame." Adèle's gaze never left Etienne. "You are Etienne Theriot," she said. It wasn't a question. Etienne kept his face blank. "Yes, madame." "Of course," she murmured. "I remember. You copied a deed for my late husband years ago. You had such careful handwriting." Etienne's blood went cold. She remembered his hand. She remembered ink. That meant she could remember what he'd written and what he might write again. Livaudet cleared his throat. "Madame, we came regarding an urgent matter." Adèle lifted a gloved hand. "I know why you came," she said softly. "Thibodaux has a mouth. It never stops." She turned her head slightly, and a young maid appeared at the door with a tray. Tea already poured, already prepared, as if Adèle had been waiting for them. "Sit," Adèle said. "Drink. Calm your hearts before you ruin yourselves." Livaudet hesitated, then obeyed, because obeying was what men like him did around women like her. Etienne sat opposite Adèle, every muscle tight beneath his skin. Adèle lifted her cup delicately. "A blonde girl in chains," she said, as if reciting a headline. "How dramatic. How irresistible to the imagination. Thibodaux said carefully, "The parish is concerned about confusion." Adele smiled faintly. "Confusion," she repeated. "What a gentle word for gossip." Etienne couldn't stop himself. "Why was she in chains, madame?" Adele's eyes glinted. "Why do you care, Monsieur Theriot?" "Because," Etienne said, voice steady with effort, "people saw her." "And people see what they want," Adele replied. "Do you know how many enslaved children are born with hair lighter than their mothers? Do you know what men do in the dark and then deny in daylight?" The words were sharp, but she spoke them like facts, not confessions. Etienne felt bile rise. The truth she was pointing to was ugly and common, and she was using it like a shield. Yes, men abuse. Yes, children result. Therefore, nothing you saw matters. Thibodaux tried again. "Madame, the issue is the paperwork. The listing—" "Paper," Adele cut in. And there it was. The same theme, the same weapon. She leaned forward slightly, eyes steady. "You understand paper, do you not? Paper is what keeps this parish from becoming a swamp full of knives." Etienne held her gaze. "Paper can also hide knives." A brief silence. Then Adele laughed softly, once. Not amused, just entertained. "You are bold," she murmured. "That is dangerous in a young man." She sipped her tea, then set it down. "I will tell you the only truth you need," Adele said. "That girl is not a Saint-Merci. She is not my blood. She is not my responsibility beyond what the law says she is." "And the law says she is property," Etienne said. Adele's smile thinned. "The law says many things." She rose, gliding closer, and for a moment Etienne could smell her perfume. Orange peel and something darker beneath. The same faint sweetness he'd smelled on the ribbon. His stomach tightened. Adele stopped behind him, voice dropping near his ear like a threat wrapped in velvet. "Do you know why this has to be handled quickly?" she whispered. "Because if people believe they can question paper based on a girl's face, then every man in this parish with a secret in his bloodline becomes vulnerable. Every fortune becomes unstable. Every marriage becomes suspicious." She moved around him, returning to her chair with perfect calm. "This is not about one girl," she said. "This is about the South's mirror, and the South breaks mirrors." Thibodaux's hands trembled around his cup. Etienne forced himself to ask, "Where is she now?" Adele looked at him as if he'd asked where she stored her coal. "Not here," she said, "and not where you can reach her." Etienne's fingers found the ring in his pocket again, pressing against it like it might speak. Adele's eyes flicked down. Just a flicker. Too quick for anyone else to notice. Then her gaze snapped back up, sharp. "You came here with something," she said softly. "Didn't you?" The room chilled. Thibodaux stammered, "Madame, we came with questions, not accusations." Adele ignored him. She looked directly at Etienne. "Show me your hands," she said. Etienne's heart hammered. He kept his expression blank. "Why?" "Because," Adele said, voice gentle, "I have lost something today. And lost things have a habit of reappearing in the wrong pockets." Thibodaux stiffened. "Madame, surely—" Adele's eyes flashed. "Quiet." One word and Thibodaux fell silent. Etienne felt sweat gather at the base of his spine. If he pulled the ring out, she'd know Margot had given it to him. If he didn't, she might order him searched anyway. Either way, the net tightened. Then, from somewhere deeper in the house, a sound drifted out, thin, cracked, like someone trying not to scream. Adele didn't react, but Etienne did. His head snapped toward the hallway. Another sound followed, a sharp slap of something against wood. A voice muttering, "Hush, hush!" Thibodaux's face went pale. Adele's smile returned, controlled. "The household is restless," she said. "Rumors make servants stupid." Etienne rose before he could stop himself. "Who is that?" Adele's eyes hardened. "Do sit down." Etienne didn't. Adele stood too, and for the first time the Polish cracked enough to reveal what sat beneath. You want truth? She said, voice suddenly cold. Here is one. If you force your way into things that are not yours, you will become something the parish can erase. Ink first, then flesh. Thibodaux grabbed Etienne's sleeve, urgent. But Etienne's gaze had latched onto the hallway. A maid appeared there, young, trembling. Her eyes met Etienne's for a heartbeat, and in that heartbeat she did something almost imperceptible. She touched her own ear. Then she turned and vanished back into the corridor. A signal. Etienne's pulse spiked. He looked back at Adele, who was watching him with narrowed eyes. Like a cat watching a mouse, remember it has teeth. You will leave, Adele said softly. Now, before you insult me with your imagination any further. Thibodaux bowed again, too quickly. Madame, forgive. Adele's gaze slid to him, contemptuous. You are forgiven because you are useful. Then she looked at Etienne one last time. And you, she said, are forgiven because you are young. Do not test how long that mercy lasts. Mercy. Her plantation's name was Sainte Merci? And suddenly Etienne understood. The name wasn't a prayer. It was a joke. They turned to go. As Etienne stepped off the gallery, he felt eyes on him from the shadows near the kitchen door. He glanced once, quickly. An older woman stood there, half hidden, skin dark, hair wrapped, posture straight despite age. Her gaze was steady and exhausted, the look of someone who had held too many secrets in her teeth. When Etienne's eyes met hers, she didn't flinch. She lifted her hand slightly, 2 fingers pressed to her chest, then pointed toward the sugar house. Not a request, a direction. In the carriage, Thibodaux' voice shook. We got nothing. We got plenty, Etienne said, staring straight ahead as the wheels rolled back toward the gate. We got threatened, Thibodaux whispered. And we got watched, Etienne murmured. Which means she's afraid. The cane closed in around the road as they moved away. But Etienne didn't feel like they'd left Sainte Merci. He felt like Sainte Merci had reached out a hand and wrapped fingers around his throat. They made it a mile before Etienne said, Stop. Thibodaux snapped the reins. Are you mad? If they're taking her downriver tonight, Etienne said. We don't have time for safe. Thibodaux stared at him. What are you doing? Etienne's voice lowered. Going back. Thibodaux' face twisted. To the plantation? You'll be shot. Not to the front, Etienne said. To the sugar house. Thibodaux' hands shook. Why? Because someone inside told me, Etienne said. And because whatever Adele is hiding, it isn't just paper. Thibodaux swallowed hard. Then, with a movement that looked like resignation and guilt tangled together, he turned the carriage off the main road onto a narrow path that cut behind the cane. They left the carriage under trees and went on foot, the air thick with insects and sweet rot. The cane rose around them, whispering against itself like a crowd that couldn't decide whether to cheer or pray. They reached the edge of the sugar house yard as twilight deepened. Smoke hung low. Men moved like shadows carrying sacks, stoking fires, feeding the hungry maw of the mill. The sound was constant, grinding, creaking, like bones being chewed. They slipped behind stacked barrels, keeping low. Near the back door, the older woman Etienne had seen by the kitchen, waited as if she'd known he would come. Up close, her face was lined, eyes bright with something that wasn't hope. Survival, sharpened into clarity. You the writing boy, she said softly, voice rough with age. Etienne nodded. Yes, who are you? Her mouth tightened. Name don't matter. Names get stole. She looked at Thibodaux, and her eyes narrowed with bitter recognition. And you the man who make it legal. Thibodaux flinched. Madame! She cut him off. Don't madame me. Then she turned back to Etienne, and for the first time her voice trembled, not with fear, but with anger held too long. She got chains on her, "'Cause she got a face that make white folks lose they mind," the woman hissed. "That face ain't supposed to be where it is." Etienne's throat tightened. "You know her." The woman's gaze flicked toward the sugar house door, where a man shouted orders. "I know that child since she was small," she said. "I know what she was called before they put lies on her." Etienne's pulse hammered. "What was her name?" The woman hesitated, swallowing as if the word itself could kill her. Then she said, low and fierce, "Marguerite." Marguerite. The M on the ribbon. Margot shortened like a blade. Etienne's breath caught. "Who named her that?" The woman's eyes flashed. "Her mama did. Her mama was Iris," Etienne said carefully, remembering the ledger. The woman's lips curled in disgust. "Iris ain't her mama," she spat. "Iris was the name they wrote 'cause it fit." Thibodaux went pale. "Then who—" The woman leaned closer, voice dropping to a whisper that felt like a confession forced out of stone. "Her mama was the one person in this house Adele Saint-Merci hated more than any slave," she said. "The one person Adele couldn't whip, couldn't sell, couldn't shut up with a chain." Etienne's blood ran cold. "A white woman?" he whispered, barely able to form it. The woman's eyes held his unblinking. "A Saint-Merci," she said, and the world tilted. Because if that was true, if Marguerite's mother was white, and the child had been written into slavery anyway, then the question wasn't just why a blonde girl was in chains. The question was how many people had to agree to pretend she wasn't who she was. "How?" Etienne whispered. "How does a planter's blood become this?" The woman's jaw clenched. "Same way a lie become law," she said, staring at Thibodaux. "With paper, with stamps, with men who hungry for sugar money." Thibodaux looked like he might collapse. "Who was her mother?" he croaked. The woman's gaze flicked toward the big house, where lights glowed like eyes. "Don't you say that name loud," she warned. "That name got buried, and if it crawl up, Adele will burn the whole parish to bury it again." Etienne's mouth went dry. "Tell me anyway." The woman stared at him for a long moment, then nodded once as if deciding his fate. "Madeleine," she whispered. "Madeleine Saint-Merci." A name Etienne had never seen in any ledger. Because the ledgers didn't keep women who embarrassed the family. They erased them. A shout rang out nearby, men moving, quicker now, lanterns swinging, the yard changing rhythm. The older woman's eyes widened. "They moving her," she hissed. "Now, not later." Etienne's heart slammed. "From where?" The woman jerked her chin toward the back of the sugar house. "They got a cart. They gonna take her to the river road and meet the wagon." Thibodaux grabbed Etienne's arm. "We can't—" Etienne yanked free, voice low and urgent. "If you're still with me," he breathed, more to himself than to anyone, "then don't blink, because this is the part where the parish decides who gets to be human." He looked at the older woman. "How do we get her out?" The woman's face tightened. "You don't," she said. "Not clean?" "Then not clean," Etienne snapped. The woman stared at him, then reached into her wrap and pulled out a scrap of paper folded small. It was stained. Old. The ink faded. She pressed it into Etienne's hand. "A page tore from the family Bible," she whispered. "I've been holding it like fire. I was waiting for somebody who could use it." Etienne unfolded it with trembling fingers. A birth record, written in a careful feminine hand. Marguerite, born under thunder. The rest was smudged, but two words remained sharp, as if God himself had protected them. Madeleine. Saint-Merci. Etienne's throat tightened. This proves... It prove enough to get you killed, the woman hissed. So you better make it worth it. A cart creaked behind the sugar house. Boots. A muffled voice, female, cut off quickly. Etienne's spine went cold. "Margot," he whispered. Thibodaux's face crumpled with panic. "Etienne, please!" Etienne shoved the Bible scrap into his pocket with the ring, two pieces of truth knocking together like flint. He looked at Thibodaux. You still have the judge's seal? He demanded. Thibodaux nodded weakly. Then you're going to use it, Etienne said. Right now. You're going to write something so powerful, even thieves have to pause. Thibodaux stammered, A writ won't stop men with guns. It will. If the men with guns are scared, the judge will hang them for stealing the wrong kind of property, Etienne said. The older woman's eyes flashed. He right, she whispered. White fear bigger than any law. A shout rang out, closer. The older woman grabbed Etienne's sleeve. You go left through the cane. There a ditch. It lead to the river road. If you want to catch that cart, you run like the devil on you. Etienne didn't hesitate. He took off, feet pounding dirt, cane slicing his sleeves, insects rising like sparks. Behind him, Thibodaux stumbled after, breathing ragged, clutching the tin box with the seal like it weighed a soul. They reached the ditch, slid down into mud, crawled like animals, then climbed up again onto the river road. Lantern lights swung ahead. A cart rolled slowly, drawn by a mule. Two men walked beside it with rifles. And in the cart, hunched low beneath a tarp, an iron chain glinted in the last light. Etienne's lungs burned. Thibodaux whispered, shaking, If they see us... Etienne lifted a hand. Not yet. He stepped out onto the road, heart pounding so hard he thought it might give him away. He raised his voice in the calmest tone he'd ever forged. Hold! He called. The cart stopped. The two armed men froze, rifles lifting slightly. One spat into the dirt. Who the hell are you? Etienne walked forward slowly, letting them see his clean clothes, his controlled posture, his paperman skin. Etienne Theriot, he said, from the parish notary's office. The men exchanged a look. Not fear, yet, but uncertainty. And, the first man barked. Thibodaux stepped beside Etienne, hands shaking as he held up the tin box. I have an order, Thibodaux said, voice cracking, but loud enough. Under the judge's seal. At the word seal, the men stiffened. Fear flickered. Briefly, because seals meant consequences when the wrong white man got angry. The second man narrowed his eyes. What order? Etienne swallowed, then said the lie that might save her, or kill them all. A property dispute, he said. The girl's transfer is suspended pending verification of identity. The first man laughed harshly. Verification? She's listed. That's enough. Etienne stepped closer, voice lowering, carrying only to them. Not if the listing is wrong, he said. Not if she's the kind of wrong that ruins judges. The men hesitated. Behind them, the tarp shifted slightly. A pale eye caught lantern light through the gap. Margot. Watching. Still standing. Even hunched. The second man's voice dropped. You saying she's... Etienne didn't answer. He didn't have to. Because the fear in that man's eyes filled in the blank. Thibodaux opened the tin box with trembling fingers, pulling out the seal wrapped in cloth. The first man's face went pale. You ain't supposed to have that. Thibodaux's jaw clenched. The judge entrusted it to the notary for emergencies, he lied, because lying was the only language power understood. The men stared, weighing guns against paper, violence against the possibility of violence from above. Then a new sound cut through the road, hoofbeats, fast. Deputy Landry appeared around the bend on horseback, lantern swinging from his saddle, eyes wild. What is this? He shouted. The two armed men exhaled in relief, like backup had arrived. Landry's gaze snapped to Etienne. Recognition flared, then anger. You! He hissed. I told you upstairs. Etienne held his ground. Deputy, he said, voice steady. There's a question about the listing. Landry laughed once, sharp. No, there ain't. He rode closer, eyes flicking to the tarp, to the chain. Then he leaned down toward Etienne, voice dropping low enough the others couldn't hear. She gave you something, Landry whispered, eyes gleaming. Didn't she? Etienne's blood went cold. Landry's mouth twisted. That girl's got a talent for putting poison in pockets. Etienne stared up at him. What do you know? Landry's gaze hardened. I know Saint Merci pays for silence. I know the judge wants this done before midnight. And I know if you don't step aside, I'll have to decide whether to arrest you or bury you." Livaudès made a choking sound beside him, and from beneath the tarp Margot's voice, thin, fierce, cut through the night like a blade. "Deputy," she said, "tell them who my mother was." Every man on that road froze. Landry's face went white, because the moment she spoke those words, it was no longer just a transfer. It was an accusation aimed straight at the parish's throat. Landry's hand tightened on his reins. His eyes locked on Etienne, and Etienne realized with a sudden chill that Deputy Landry wasn't just afraid of the girl. He was afraid of the name she was about to say, because it would drag his own name into the mud with hers.